Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Carasoft Technology would like to welcome you to our ServiceNow Federal Tech Talk, Work Smarter, Not Harder with ServiceNow HR Process Mining. Joining us today with ServiceNow, we have Matt Goodman, Employee Workflow Solutions Sales Executive, and Shane Gallagher, Employee Workflow Solution Consultant. At this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to our speakers. Team, the floor is all yours.
Thanks so much for the introductions, Heather. My name is Matt Glaudeman. I'm a solution sales executive with ServiceNow's Federal Employee Workflows team. Super excited to be speaking about process mining today. I come from a background of about 10 years of experience working with federal organizations in supporting their efforts to improve talent management, technology, and outcomes. So thanks again for joining us and super excited to be with you today. Shane?
Great. Thanks, Matt. Thanks you all for joining today, as Matt said. My name is Shane Gallagher. I'm a solution consultant at ServiceNow. I work closely with a lot of our customers related to employee workflow products, including HR service delivery, workplace service delivery, and legal service delivery, to help align on technical fit and making sure that it's the right product for them, aligning on use cases. My background is also working closely with federal government as well as commercial organizations as well in a consulting capacity, actually implementing softwares just like ServiceNow. So looking forward to today's session and demonstrating a little bit of the power of the product we're going to be getting into today. Matt?
Thanks, Shane. So just to give a little sneak preview of what we're going to be digging into, we're going to start with an overview of business processes and workflows and a quick conversation on design of business processes versus reality and use of those business processes. From there, we're going to jump into an overview of ServiceNow's process mining capability. And then Shane's going to lead us through a demonstration of a live environment aligned to a couple of use cases, specifically around request to fill for vacant positions and onboarding. Now, one administrative item before we get into the content. Some of the information includes forward-looking statements, and they are based on our beliefs and assumptions and information currently available to us at the date of this presentation. So with that in mind, all the logistics out of the way, we'll go ahead and jump into the content. We wanted to start with a quote, and I thought this one from the great American author Maya Angelou worked well. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And it's really why we're here today, not just to see what's out there, but to learn so that we can go back and apply what we've learned and improve. This quote also aligns to the solution we're going to be talking about for the next 45 minutes or so. ServiceNow's process mining solution is the brand name of our in-platform process mining capability that automates the process of X-raying our workflows and showing us where and how we can do better for anyone and everyone involved with them. We wanted to start with a few real-world anecdotes. With everything we do, there is a designed and desired path in our minds for how it should work and how things should play out. And when you design things, you design for efficiency as well as completeness to provide the best experience possible for everyone. For example, if I look at someone designing a park like the National Mall, they design it with paths for people to walk, benches to sit on, and grassy areas for people like Shane here to play competitive kickball. We design to provide the optimal experience for as many people as possible. Unfortunately, what we design isn't always what ends up happening in reality. And while this new path in reality may be more efficient for those trying to get from point A to point B, it certainly doesn't have a positive impact on the experience of people like Shane playing competitive kickball matches with tourists walking through the outfield. Shane, am I right on this?
You are so right, Matt. And I can't blame them. They're just trying to get from point A to point B, and that's the clearest path for them. And they might not realize what's going on around them, those clear defined paths. So they're just trying to get to their final destination. And they might not notice that, and they're putting themselves in danger, and they're also putting me in danger of not winning the game. So really, it's not actually ideal for anybody involved.
Having walked through a few kickball matches in my day unknowingly, I know you got to keep your head on a swivel. So reality versus design path. Another example is my recent Uber trip to downtown DC for a business meeting. Uber proposed an optimal route to get me to my destination in 16 minutes. But Uber did not expect the driver to avoid the toll roads on 66 and take the long route around the Pentagon and through Southwest DC. In this case, the reality of the trip took 45 minutes instead of the planned 16 minutes. Not an ideal experience. Now, Shane, living downtown, you know a thing or two about road closures and detours, right?
Oh yeah, sometimes it's really impossible to predict what's going to be down, how long it's really going to take to get to where you need to go. Especially if I'm trying to make a brunch reservation in downtown DC, I really am not sure what the best path is going to be, and it's going to change pretty much every day, really. So it's hard to tell and be sure what's the right way and what's the best way, most optimal way to get where you need to go.
You never know when that presidential motorcade is going to be blocking you from your brunch appointment. So again, design path and then reality. Same thing plays out with our business processes, designed for completeness and efficiency. But the reality is that not all work flowing through the process is taking that design route. This has a negative impact on the experience that both the end user as well as the people working the request are having. And identifying what is actually happening within our business process and then improving them isn't always as easy and obvious as the Uber example. Improving workflows can be complex, and it's often augmented by business process consultants as part of a larger change management effort. Shane, given your consulting experience, I bet you've worked on a couple of process improvement initiatives in your day.
Absolutely, yes. Really, those are some of the best projects to get, because that was great, easy, quick wins for us on the consulting side of things, and it helped us collaborate and work closer with our customers. But really, what that meant for us is a couple of different pain points for our customers here, right? It's first understanding what's wrong with the process. So we need to pull in the data. Once we have the data, we need to make sure we have the right stakeholders involved, and that's taking time away from their days. Ultimately, these types of projects can be really cumbersome and take a lot of time and resources put into it. Oftentimes federal agencies don't have those people, so they need to bring in consultants. And then finally, getting that internal alignment and making sure that everyone's on the same page and knows that point forward where you want to improve on that process. Ultimately, it's a really cumbersome process. It's going to take some time. As a former consultant, I can say I love these kind of projects. They would just pop up when we'd be implementing a process, and we have to go back, refine it, understand the data, and ultimately help deliver that refined process. But that added on even more time and even more money for those federal customers that we're working closely with to help essentially provide more efficiencies and help reduce costs ultimately. So it's a little bit, trying to help them get to that final destination, but it took some time in ways that we now have tools available that can help automate a lot of those features for us. But when we're talking about those different types of processes, right, there's so many different workflows, services are provided from an HR perspective, but ultimately what this impacts is all of those processes impact the employee as well across their entire employee journey. Matt, anything to kind of share more on how that employee journey plays into this process, the idea of process improvement?
Yeah, absolutely, Shane. So when you look at that employee lifecycle, from when a manager validates the need to hire and completes an SF-52, all the way through offboarding an employee, there are hundreds of processes in between. From getting that new hire onboarded to an employee requesting training with an SF-182, or processing a performance award for a job well done. Even things like getting a laptop upgrade from IT. You have stakeholders from across the entire organization, HR, IT, security, facilities, and so on, all collaborating to get work done. Each of these business processes is a workflow that is designed to provide the optimal experience and outcome for stakeholders involved. And many of these business processes often veer from the designed path, whether it's sitting idle in someone's work queue, rejected by a manager or employee, or reassigned to different team members. Delays in service can have a negative impact on employee experience and organizational service management objectives, like compliance with OPM's 80-day time to hire model. Let's drill down into the front end of this snake chart and into that 80-day model quickly here. There are numerous processes throughout OPM's time to hire model, and a delay in any of these steps could make or break that 80-day objective. For example, you have 2 days to validate a hiring need and request a personnel action. But what if that SF-52 is delayed a few days because it takes a few rounds of approval before finalizing? Or let's say you're negotiating with a candidate on a TJO and need a superior qualifications assignment or SQA, which might slow down the tail end of that 80-day model. Or maybe there's a bottleneck in personnel security that extends beyond the 10-day target. These potential delays to business processes all add up and can have a real impact on hitting that 80-day goal. So this is where ServiceNow process mining can come into play to make a tangible impact on a customer's business outcomes. What process mining offers our customers is the opportunity to do better. In a few clicks, we can expose to your stakeholders the reality of their workflows across the enterprise, and this accelerates their ability to do better for everyone involved. In this session, we'll show you how with just a few clicks, you can start getting the visibility you need. Speaking of visibility, a lot of federal organizations nowadays have access to some level of analytics, right, Shane?
Absolutely. And that's where it's going to come into play, where we are talking a lot about, understanding that data. So a lot of these, in the cases of some solutions that are processing these cases, that are storing that data, right? We've got all that there. We understand how long things are taking to close. We understand where we're performing against our targets. We understand all of those different aspects across the case lifecycle. But as you can see on the screen here, then we're going to get into, I'm sure we're all very familiar with the iceberg reference, but really that's what it is. Traditional analytics can only give us so much. It's just telling us the what, but it's not telling us the why. It's not telling us why cases are taking long. It's not telling us why there's a bottleneck with that specific department, like personnel security. So really, that's just that tip of the iceberg, because ultimately what you're going to be delivering, or what you might need to present, especially to someone like an executive or leadership, is a beautiful dashboard that tells you all of those metrics, how you're performing against them, but it's not telling you the why. So ultimately, when we're looking at those types of metrics and going into that example that we were just talking about earlier before, that sort of time to hire, you can see on the screen here just an example of a dashboard that we can build on the ServiceNow platform using HR service delivery and pulling in all that different those different data points. But if you want to present this nice pretty dashboard, right, telling you all of those quick, easy metrics, what's the average time to hire, how long are hiring requests taking, what it's really showing us or telling us is the what, but it's not telling us the why. You bring this to one of your executives, they're going to say, God, this is great to have this data and information. Now tell me why. Why did we go up in our average time to hire? Where can we improve on that process? Why are certain stages in the hiring process taking longer than others? All of these questions we have the why about, but that's not what we're getting out of this dashboard. We're getting those numbers, we're getting the understanding, but now we need to action on those and say, now, how do we improve and move forward? And that's where we're going to see below that iceberg. This is where process mining comes into play, because what process mining is going to do for us is it's going to take all that data that exists in the system, even data that exists outside of the system, bring it all together and start telling us the why. Why is this certain case type stuck between close, or between awaiting approval and close? Why are we taking so long to approve that? Why is personnel security taking longer to provision types of badges? Or why is IT taking long to provision equipment, maybe during the onboarding process? All of those whys is what process mining is going to help us get to. So we understand not just what the data is, but why the data is that way and what we can do to improve upon that. And that's where we're going to get into a little bit more around what do we mean by those metrics and those performance standards. And for that, what I'm going to first do is just kind of explain a little bit around one of the terms we use often, which is what you might be familiar with, KPI, also known as Key Performance Indicator. Now, Key Performance Indicator, for those who are unaware, really is just meant to give you a goal in mind. What are we trying to accomplish here? How long should cases be taking to close in a timely manner? What should be the satisfaction score after a case has been closed? Those are just types of key performance indicators the agency or your organization is trying to meet to determine success. And an easy example here that you can see on the screen is what process mining can do for that really basic HR case workflow. So here you can see on the screen what we're understanding, that why behind that key performance indicator. Maybe cases are going back too often or taking too long to resolve. That's great that we understand the data. Now, process mining is going to tell us why these are taking too long. What is the common denominator here? So we can understand why behind that goal or that KPI. Going even beyond these more simple workflows, we can even get to more complex workflows. We'll see an example of this later on in the demonstration portion of this presentation, but just an example here of that why behind the key performance indicator, why behind that goal. When we're talking about, for example, an onboarding case, we are starting from when we determine that onboarding is, maybe that's prior day one, maybe that's day one on the job, but ultimately we know there's many, many steps that have to take place leading up to that first day on the job. Provisioning equipment from IT, getting their badge printed out and making sure they have access to that, getting access to right systems, submitting HR paperwork. There's all these different workflows playing together at the same time. So process mining can not only, as we saw in the example before, tell us a more basic workflow and understand that why are certain cases maybe taking long to resolve. Now we can go one step deeper and understand we have an onboarding case. There's multiple different data points we're grabbing from. There's IT, personnel security, HR. Process mining can still bring all of that data together for us and help us analyze and improve upon those processes, no matter how complex they are. Finally, it goes even beyond just data within the system. We can even pull in data outside the system. So in this example that you can see here, this is just one around if you want to be able to pull in hiring data. So let's say, for example, HR service delivery can be used to submit requests to fill workflows and processes for those supervisors filling a vacancy on their team. But ultimately, we want to understand that start to finish, how long did it take from requesting to fill a position, right? Opening up that vacancy on the team, all the way to getting that person hired and day one on the job. That requires data from not just ServiceNow, but also your applicant tracking system, maybe like USA Staffing, Monster Government Solutions, whatever tool you're using to track your applicants and how they are moving through that hiring workflow. That data can also be pulled in, married to your ServiceNow data, and also applied to process mining. So you're understanding the holistic picture and able to improve upon those processes, all with just a few clicks of a button using process mining as a tool. And finally, here too, can get a little more into what are some other common use cases, right? When we're talking about those key performance indicators, we're referring to goals like time to resolve, why are cases going back and forth between closed and open. So Matt, why don't you walk us through a little bit of what are some other common use cases to better understand what process mining can actually help us understand and do with our data?
Yeah, thanks, Shane. So just a few examples here to try to make this just even a little bit more tangible, right? These are sort of things that our customers can sort of expect to identify and see in the data once they actually drill down into it with process mining. First off, we have the classic multi-hop issue, or translated into normal English, requests ping-ponging between different groups. Reassignments are very time-consuming and can reduce overall productivity. In order to improve, you need to understand who is reassigning cases and the types of cases that are being reassigned. Once we get a better understanding of this, we can take action to make those improvements. Another example, sometimes cases require us to go back to the employee for additional information. This might be part of the design process, but sometimes this might highlight the opportunity to improve the request intake experience to gather more information upfront. This can help speed the closure process. Another example of this, sometimes you need to get employee acceptance before you can close the case. And sometimes when you reach out to that employee to get that acceptance, the case comes back to the service provider or the fulfiller, and it goes back into the state of work in progress. So there's something that wasn't right, where potentially we can gather more information upfront or at different points in the process to have more likely a successful outcome for that particular service request. Anytime something goes out to an employee and comes back, that's an opportunity to improve. The last sort of example case we have here are cases going directly to closed. These can be potential self-service targets for our customers. I'll give you an example. We had a customer the other day that described a scenario where a call may come in and an agent answers the question over the phone, sends a knowledge article to that employee, maybe via email or associated with the case, and then moves the case directly to closed. We think of this scenario as having a human search engine because we already had the content in ServiceNow. The employee just chose not to find it. So this sort of scenario can highlight where they, as a customer, can improve knowledge articles, maybe add virtual agent conversations, or maybe make their knowledge articles a little bit sort of more marketable from a customer access perspective and a little more relevant so they know where to go. The last slide that we wanted to share before we get into the live demo is actually an example from ServiceNow, where we're using process mining within HR service delivery internally here as a company. When we applied process mining to HR service delivery, we identified that 74% of HR cases needed to be recategorized. And that had a downstream impact of 60% of our cases taking longer than 6 days to resolve. Now, as we started to dig in and look for areas to improve the intake experience, we found that most cases were submitted as general or other because employees weren't taking time to submit the accurate request type. So then we started to look at ways to improve the intake experience or maybe apply predictive intelligence to automate where cases go. We found that if we acted upon these findings, there is opportunity to make the process 46% faster. Again, it comes back to acting on these things. With process mining, we're able to identify and quantify these inefficiencies. Then it's just a matter of acting on them in the ServiceNow platform. All right, Shane, we've gone over a lot of content here. I think it's time for the good stuff. What do you say? Are you ready to show us what this looks like in a live environment?
I think so. I think it's time we shake things up a little bit. Let's go live, as they say. So once you're done sharing, Matt, I'll take over and we're good to go.
Yeah, you got
All right.
it. I'll keep an eye on the Q&A if any questions come in.
Perfect. Appreciate it. All right. Well, yeah. And as Matt said too, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A. We're happy to answer them throughout the demonstration. Or if you want to, take your time, let it all, simmer for a little bit, ask questions at the end. Happy to do that as well. So in terms of what we're going to see from this live demonstration of process mining, first, we're going to see from a couple of different those use cases we talked about and how process mining is going to help us to be able to understand the data really at an in-depth level beyond what a simple dashboard can give us, and then go beyond that and show now what can we do to action on these opportunities to improve those processes. So a couple of those different use cases we talked about, right? We mentioned the onboarding process, how that can impact multiple different departments. Before we get into a more complex use case, let's start with something that, definitely still has its complexities, but one that I'm sure most folks are familiar with, the request to fill process. So request to fill, we understand that while, simply a supervisor needs to fill a vacancy on their team or open that up, there's a job posting that goes out, interviews need to happen, certifications, these background check, et cetera. Once the candidate gets selected, there's so many different moving pieces to that. We want to make sure that all those stakeholders involved in the request to fill process are able to operate as efficiently as possible. And most importantly, we can help automate any of those steps in the process for them using this tool, helping them to save time for themselves so they can stay focused on those mission priority tasks and saving time for those HR specialists or business partners so that they're able to focus on more high priority work as well. So to do that, like I said, when we're working with process mining, what we do is we create something called a project. That project is going to help define what we're looking for based on the data and how we're looking to improve upon that. Once we set up that project and set up those configurations of the data we're looking for, what we're trying to gather from the data and those ways to improve, then with that click of a button, we're going to be able to get this view that's showing us a lot of really great immediate details just from that click of a button by getting that data. So understanding what the request to fill process, there's multiple different statuses it's going to go through. But at a high level, we just want to understand first and foremost when that case starts, when it's in that ready status, and then how long it's taking to go through once it's set to work in progress, if it's waiting on approvals, maybe it's closed. But ultimately, as we saw in one of those graphs earlier, it's not always going to go down that happy path, as we call it. It's going to bounce around a little bit. Someone's going to be maybe missing a piece of information they didn't know they had to provide. So we need to open it up again, get the information, and then we can close the case. But what we're seeing from this visual on the screen, this workflow, is a really simple understanding of the volume of those cases and how long it's taking for those cases to move between those different statuses. So ultimately, what we can see from here, if I just zoom in a little bit, we can see all those cases going through this workflow, right? Some starting that ready status, some going to work in progress. But what we're also seeing here is not that simple happy path, as I called it, nice, easy flow where everything ends in close complete and doesn't come back out. We actually see quite a few cases that went from close complete back to work in progress. So this is great. The data is helping us to visualize and understand the number and volume of cases that are going back to work in progress. It's even telling us how long they're taking to go back to that status, meaning cases sat for, on average, for ultimately 3 days before it was sent back to work in progress, right? Think about that. That's 3 days of work right there. That was just sitting, that ultimately had to be re-reviewed, opened back up again, something that could have been resolved with a tool like process mining. So in understanding all these different steps, we can even drill in to some of those different variations, right? When we're talking about variations, referring to the pattern that a case might go through in terms of a pattern of those statuses, right? Cases might go from ready to work in progress, awaiting acceptance, back to work in progress, right? So cases have a unique path they follow. We want to be able to identify what's the pattern between all those different cases. So for example, we can even see here a variation of cases going from work in progress to post complete back to work in progress. We're seeing how many cases that has impacted and what's the average duration as well. Again, these quick numbers that the tool is giving us with just that one click of a button is automatically and already helping me better understand what's going on with my processes. Can I start to identify ways that we can improve upon that?
Hey, Shane, real quickly. So this is an awesome example to highlight. If you look at from closed complete, if you look at the numbers there off towards the right along that line, you can see that 3-day delay. When something needs to go back to work in progress, you get a 3-day delay. And when you think about that in the context of, let's say, that 80-day time to hire model, right? Up early on in that process with validated need, request personnel action, if all of a sudden something needs to be reworked and takes 3 extra days in order to be approved, that can have a really tangible impact on that overall 80-day goal. So just a sort of real world example of potential impacts and benefits of being able to get ahead of that sort of bottleneck in the process here.
Absolutely. And that's where the tool is going to help us identify even those bottlenecks, right? We can see the variations of those steps it's going through, but ultimately we want to understand why is something sitting in this status for so long? Who was it sitting with and why was it sitting with them? The tool is going to be able to help identify what those bottlenecks are, see why cases were sitting in a certain status for X amount of time, maybe assigned to a certain group of people. And then from there, you can use that data and action on it, work with that group, identify, understand what is taking so long, why are you having delays? And then you can use the system to then act on that, automate from there. And it goes even beyond just this more, I wouldn't say simple, but more simple use case of request to fill process, and even impacts the overall onboarding as an example. Matt earlier was talking to us a little bit around the employee journey and just the types of journeys employees might have. It's not just onboarding and offboarding. So many different journeys that can occur in between returning to the workplace, going on parental leave, transitioning into a new role maybe, but ultimately there's a lot of different journeys an employee is going to encounter. So what can we do to ensure that those journeys an employee is going to go on are as efficient as possible? And we've made sure that those processes are optimized. So employee has an easy experience, they're able to work with the right people and make sure that we're able to essentially provide as good of an employee experience as possible for anyone in the organization. And that's where we can look at an example of using process mining for the onboarding as well. So with onboarding, like I said, there's so many different pieces involved in onboarding, right? It's multiple different stages of onboarding, a lot of different departments and business units that are involved in helping to onboard a single candidate. We can even see here from the screen, just by looking at our onboarding cases, there's all these different moving parts. It gets really complicated really quickly. But with process mining, we can really just very easily drill down into a better understanding of, well, I just want to know from a high level, where are my onboarding cases going? How is that flow happening? And ultimately, if they're going back to any statuses, why are they going back? What was missed? What can we do to help automate and catch that in the future? And that's where from this tool, we're able to, just by zooming in, then get that drill down into our overall onboarding. So for those onboarding, right, we talked about different stages in the onboarding process. Those can be defined however you see fit, right? Once you've defined those in the system, then the system's going to use those configurations to help tell the story of where you can improve on your onboarding. Even from here, just drilling down into that, we can see the number of cases that went from how they flowed from those pre-boarding to day one prep, all the way to that day one task. But then we're also seeing a bit of a loop on some of them, right? Some of them are going back into those statuses and stages. Maybe some paperwork was missed, that they had to file, or some paperwork was not filled out properly and it was not caught till later on. So what can we do going forward to automate? Do we need to add in additional reminders, notifications, ways that we can help automate or really correct that process throughout to make sure that no information is missing throughout it, and we're helping to act on those ways we can improve the process? Ultimately, though, what we want to be able to get from the tool is understanding, this is all great to better visualize my work and how it's being done, but I also want to be able to then define those metrics and have the tool tell me where exactly I can improve. It's great for me to understand this, especially if I'm a process analyst or anyone helping to improve the processes from an HR perspective. But ultimately, I would really appreciate it if the tool could actually tell me what I need to be doing instead of giving me ways that I can visualize that data. And that's where we can get more into what we provide as the summary and insights tool and some of those improved automation opportunities. So to show that, I'm just going to go back to that kind of main example we had before, right? When we're talking about the overall general HR cases that we're processing, those might be inquiries that come in, those might be benefits updates or beneficiaries updates, could be personnel actions as well. Really, any of those types of general HR inquiries or requests that come in, we want to be able to make sure that we are tracking the metrics that are going to be able to have us stay on task so that we can present this and act on these items if those KPIs or really goals are off by any measure. So once we've defined what those goals are, the tool is then going to give us this dashboard view and help us understand based off our defined goals, where we are currently at. Let's say, for example, what is that average resolution time? We can also see that it's actually gone down, over a certain period of time as we've defined it. We can also see other things such as percent of cases resolved in first contact has gone up. But once we define those metrics, the tool is helping us to understand, visualize that, drill down into those. But ultimately, the tool is going to give us the most important piece here, which is those improvement opportunities. So once we've defined in the tool what we're looking to get out of it, right? If we say we're looking to lower the data is telling us that our average resolution time has gone up. We want it to go down. So we need to define that in the system, and the system's going to pull that data in for us and help us better understand where those inefficiencies are occurring. And to see that some of those improvement opportunities, one example that we can take a look at here is resolution efficiency. So we can define any of those improvement opportunities around the quality of how the case was handled, the performance of it, right? How long it took, the resolution time, et cetera. But ultimately, once we defined what that improvement opportunity is going to look like, then the system's going to go in, find that data for us, and then give us a more actionable way to then improve that. So from here, we can see, cases where time between work in progress and closed complete is more than 2 days. I want to be able to better understand and view and visualize that so I can actually act on what I can do to improve that process. So just by getting that insight in that button, the tool is giving us all that data to understand where we can improve upon that. And ultimately, it's going to show us as that visual medium too, right, what that flow is looking like. And it's going to give us that root cause analysis as part of the tool as well. So you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here, we can schedule those tasks in the tool to then provide that root cause analysis for us. So it's then going to go into that flow, identify this is where the main obstacle is, or maybe that main bottleneck. And then the tool is going to be able to help us understand what we can do to improve upon that. And ultimately, this is how we're going to be able to really understand the data and have the tool tell us what we can do to improve and help automate. Maybe we need to automate an additional task to make sure that a form is filled out properly. Or maybe, for example, we need to add an additional more boundaries around required fields on when updating a form or filling out a form in the system. But ultimately, what's going to do is make sure that we are essentially building out our own roadmap to provide a more mature HR service delivery solution. So this concludes the demonstration portion of what we wanted to show. Hopefully this gave you all a little bit more of a real life example, but the tool itself can really provide a lot of those in-depth insights and things to action on for you. Once you've got that data in the system, the tool then takes it from there and saves you all of that time and costs that you might need to spend towards those consultants. As a former consultant myself, definitely familiar with those projects, but really ultimately it's helping to empower you as the user to get the information you need, act on it, build your own roadmap, and help to automate and provide more efficiency across those processes.
Awesome,
and
Shane.
finally, thanks, Matt. And finally, as part of this, we wanted to share a couple of extra helpful resources too. So Matt wanted to kick it over back to you to share some of those.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. So if you stop sharing, I'll go ahead and just bring us home here. So if there are any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat here. We welcome the opportunity to answer anything that if anything's outstanding. You've got our contact information here as well. Don't hesitate to shoot us an email, and if it's a question that we can answer, that's great. Or perhaps we can get you in touch with the right point of contact at ServiceNow to make sure that we're addressing anything that you might have. Thanks so much for your time today. We really do appreciate it. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your Thursday afternoon, and happy holidays from here on out. Thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Happy holidays.
All right. Heather, back over to you.
Hey, Matt, we did have one question that you guys might want to address real quick.
Okay.
Does process mining work with data from third-party systems like USA Staffing?
It definitely does. Shane, any additional color commentary on that one?
Yes, great question. So we've actually had a couple customers integrate their ServiceNow instances with USA Staffing. So either through that integration or by getting the data and upload it into the system, you can then marry that data with your ServiceNow HR service delivery data to understand the full picture of end-to-end hiring, starting from request to fill, maybe within the system, going through the applicant tracking system as well, pulling that data, ultimately going through candidate selection and onboarding. So once as long as you've got that data, you can pull into the system either through an integration or uploading it as a file. And once you've gotten there, process mining will take over and be able to pull that all the insights you need from that data.
Great,
Thanks,
thank
Shane.
you.
And thanks for the question, Heather.
And I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A, so I think we're all set to wrap up. So like you said, Matt, I'd just like to go ahead and thank all of our participants, as well as you both for speaking with us today. We hope the information you received during the webinar has been helpful.